Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. In the pre-dawn hours of December 26, 1996, the stillness of Christmas night was shattered inside a large Tudor home in Boulder, Colorado. The air in the house at 755 15th Street should have been filled with the remnants of holiday joy, the scent of pine needles, the rustle of discarded wrapping paper, and the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent. Instead, a mother's scream tore through the silence, initiating a chain of events that would captivate and horrify the nation for decades to come. The case of JonBenét Ramsey is not just a murder mystery, it is a cultural touchstone, a media spectacle, and an investigative quagmire. Boulder itself, nestled at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, was a city that prided itself on its low crime rate, affluence, and progressive community values. It was considered a haven, a safe place to raise a family. The Ramsey home, a sprawling 15-room, nearly 7,000-square-foot residence in the upscale University Hill neighborhood, was a physical manifestation of this ideal. This perception of safety and security would make the brutal crime discovered within its walls all the more shocking, and would perhaps contribute to the initial investigative missteps made by a police force unaccustomed to such high-profile, complex homicides. Welcome to Anatomy of Crime. We are often drawn to cases that present a clear puzzle, where logic and forensics eventually illuminate a path to the truth. But some cases defy resolution. They present a set of facts so contradictory, so tangled, that they create an investigative paralysis. Today, we dissect the anatomy of contradiction itself, as embodied by the JonBenét Ramsey case. We will explore how a crime scene compromised from the very first moments, coupled with evidence that points simultaneously toward an intimate family member and an unknown external predator, created a perfect storm of ambiguity from which the truth has never managed to escape. This is not just the story of who killed JonBenét Ramsey, but why, nearly 3 decades later, we still cannot definitively answer that question. To understand the chaos that unfolded on December 26th, we must first understand the life the Ramseys had built. They were, by all external measures, the epitome of late 90s success. JonBenét Ramsey was a self-made man, a former naval officer who had built a billion-dollar business from scratch. His company, Access Graphics, was a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, and he was a respected figure in the local business community. He projected an image of calm, Midwestern capability. Patsy Ramsey, his wife, was a charismatic and energetic former beauty queen, crowned Miss West Virginia in 1977. She was a woman known for her involvement in local charities and social events. Her life had been touched by hardship. She was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer in 1993, and friends would later say her intense focus on creating a perfect life for her children was amplified by her recovery from this near-fatal illness. This family included 9-year-old Burke, described by many as quiet and introverted, with interests in computers and model building. And then there was 6-year-old JonBenét. If Burke was the quiet one, JonBenét was the family's bright star. Patsy had channeled her own pageant background into her daughter's life, and JonBenét had become a successful participant in the child beauty pageant circuit, winning titles like America's Royale Miss and Little Miss Colorado. These pageants, with their elaborate costumes, professional makeup, and staged performances, would later become a focal point of intense public debate and media scrutiny, painting a picture of a childhood that many found unsettling and fueling speculation about the family dynamic. Christmas Day, 1996 proceeded with festive normality. The Ramseys hosted a morning gathering and later attended a Christmas party at the home of friends Fleet and Priscilla White. Accounts from party guests describe JonBenét as energetic, if perhaps a little tired toward the end of the evening. She played with other children, and nothing seemed overtly amiss. The Ramseys left the Whites' party around 9:30 p.m. JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car during the ride home. John Ramsey stated that upon arriving home, he carried the sleeping JonBenét upstairs to her bedroom. He claimed he laid her down as she was still wearing the clothes she had worn to the party, a white knit shirt with a sequined star, black velvet pants and black boots. Patsy later stated that she changed JonBenét into long johns, but left the white shirt on. Patsy and John said goodnight to Burke, whose room was nearby. John mentioned briefly checking his email and tidying his desk before heading to bed himself around 10 p.m. The house on 15th Street, with its sprawling layout and multiple levels, fell silent. The first sign of disturbance emerged approximately 8 hours later. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, the Boulder Emergency Dispatch Center received a call. The caller was Patsy Ramsey. The recording of this call has become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in the case. Patsy's voice is high-pitched and frantic as she tells the dispatcher, "We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. There's a note left. And our daughter's gone. I can't find my baby." Linguistic experts and investigators have scrutinized every second of this call. Patsy sounds undeniably distraught, yet some analysts, including those at the FBI, noted that her language seemed unusually structured for a moment of pure panic. She immediately uses the word kidnapping and mentions the note, almost as if presenting a preformed conclusion rather than a confused discovery. The dispatcher has to press her for basic information, like her location, as Patsy continues to repeat, "I don't know what to do." Even more controversial is the segment of audio after Patsy seemingly hangs up the phone, but the line remains open for several seconds. Faint voices can be heard in the background. The interpretation of these sounds is highly disputed. Some analysts, including those working for later documentaries, claim to hear a child's voice, possibly Burke's, asking, "What did you find?" Others claim to hear John Ramsey's voice sternly saying, "We're not speaking to you," followed by Patsy saying, "Help me, Jesus." The audio is too distorted for definitive consensus, but for those who believe in family involvement, it suggests Burke was awake and aware of the situation far earlier than his parents claimed, and that a conversation, not just panic, was occurring before police arrived. The ambiguity starts here, in the very first moments of the official record. The source of Patsy's immediate conclusion was a 2.5-page ransom note she claimed to have found laid out on the back staircase near the kitchen. Officer Rick French of the Boulder Police Department was the first to arrive, entering the home at 5:56 a.m. He found Patsy, dressed in the same clothes as the night before, in a state of agitation, and John Ramsey standing by the spiral staircase, seemingly composed as he read from the note. This moment marks the beginning of the investigative catastrophe. Standard procedure for a potential kidnapping involving a wealthy family often differs from a standard homicide protocol. The priority shifts from preserving evidence to facilitating communication with the supposed kidnappers for the safe return of the victim. However, the actions taken in the Ramsey house went far beyond professional protocol and into the realm of chaos. Let's dissect the anatomy of this investigative failure. First, the house was not sealed. A primary rule of investigation especially in a potential abduction from within the home, is to secure the perimeter and treat the entire house as a crime scene until proven otherwise. This did not happen. The police failed to establish a perimeter or limit access. Second, John Ramsey immediately began calling friends and family. Within an hour, the house began to fill with people. Fleet White arrived, along with Priscilla White, the Ramsey family pastor, and several other friends and victim advocates. These well-meaning individuals were not confined to a single room. They moved freely throughout the house. They made coffee in the kitchen, used the telephone, and attempted to console the family. Later, one of Patsy's friends would report tidying the kitchen counter, wiping down surfaces with a cleaning spray. In doing so, she potentially obliterated fingerprints, fibers, and trace DNA evidence from an area that would later become critical due to the discovery of a bowl of pineapple. Third, John Ramsey himself compromised key areas. At one point in the morning, while police were on scene, he left the house unaccompanied to retrieve the mail from the end of the driveway, breaking the containment bubble that should have surrounded a primary suspect or victim's family. No one thought to immediately separate John and Patsy for individual interviews, allowing them time to potentially align their stories, consciously or unconsciously. They were allowed to sit together, comfort each other, and interact without monitoring. Detective Linda Arndt arrived around 8 a.m. to take charge of the scene, but she was largely unsupported for hours. She conducted an initial walkthrough. She noted the ransom note, which demanded the specific sum of $118,000, a figure remarkably close to John Ramsey's recent corporate bonus. She also noted a distinct lack of obvious forced entry. A door near the kitchen appeared to have been left ajar, but there were no signs of splintered wood or a violent breach. A basement window was found broken, but the scene around it was initially unclear. The ransom note stipulated that a call would come between 8 o'clock and 10 a.m. to arrange the ransom drop. The entire household settled into a tense wait. Police technicians set up recording equipment on the phone lines. John Ramsey contacted his bank to arrange for the cash. The deadline of 10 a.m. arrived. Then it passed. No call came. As the hours dragged on, the atmosphere in the house shifted from anxious anticipation to dread. The kidnapping scenario began to feel less plausible. Detective Arndt, growing increasingly uneasy about the state of the investigation and the lack of a comprehensive search, finally decided on a new course of action around 1 p.m., nearly 7 hours after the initial 911 call. She turned to John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White and requested they conduct a more thorough, top-to-bottom search of the house to see if anything seemed amiss or out of place. This directive would prove to be one of the most catastrophic errors of the day. By asking the victim's father, a potential suspect, to conduct a search, she inadvertently set the stage for the destruction of the crime scene's integrity. John Ramsey was not a trained observer. He was a grieving father. John went straight to the basement, an area he claimed to have only glanced into earlier. He and Fleet White searched several rooms. John then focused on a small, windowless room under the living room, often referred to as the wine cellar. He opened the door, which had a simple wooden latch. Inside, in the dark, he located a figure lying on a white blanket on the floor. It was JonBenét. Her mouth was covered with a strip of black duct tape. A nylon cord was tied loosely around her right wrist. A more complex ligature, fashioned from the same type of cord and a broken paintbrush handle, was wrapped tightly around her neck. In that moment of discovery, John Ramsey's paternal instinct completely overwhelmed investigative protocol. He yelled, scooped his daughter's body into his arms, and carried her up the stairs, through the house, and laid her on the living room floor by the Christmas tree, amidst the gathered friends and police officers. With that single action, the kidnapping narrative officially collapsed, revealing itself as a homicide investigation. More importantly, the primary crime scene, the wine cellar, was now irrevocably compromised. By moving JonBenét's body, John Ramsey introduced his own fibers and DNA, potentially obscuring evidence left by the killer. He also removed the body from its original position, making it impossible for forensic experts to accurately analyze the scene as it was left by the perpetrator. Positional evidence, how the body lay in relation to other items, the exact state of the ligatures before being disturbed, was lost forever. The discovery confirmed the worst possible outcome, and the investigation, already on shaky ground, was now mired in contamination. The autopsy, conducted by the Boulder County coroner, Dr. John Meyer, revealed the chilling and contradictory details of her death. JonBenét had suffered a massive 8-inch linear fracture to her skull, caused by a single powerful blow from a heavy blunt object. This injury alone would have been catastrophic, causing severe brain damage and likely rendering her unconscious immediately. The official cause of death, however, was ruled as asphyxiation by strangulation, complicated by craniocerebral trauma. A key question arose: was she alive when she was strangled, or was the strangulation applied post-mortem after the head blow? The exact sequencing remains clinically uncertain, though most experts believe the head blow came first. Furthermore, the autopsy revealed undigested pieces of pineapple in her small intestine. This indicated she had eaten pineapple within a few hours of her death. When questioned, both John and Patsy Ramsey stated they did not recall giving JonBenét any pineapple after returning home from the party. A bowl of pineapple with a spoon in it was found on the kitchen counter. Fingerprints belonging to both Patsy and Burke Ramsey were found on the bowl. This seemingly minor detail would become a crucial point of contention, suggesting a late-night activity or interaction unknown to or undisclosed by her parents. From this point, the investigation split into two warring camps, fueled by suspicion, ego, and genuinely contradictory evidence. To understand this divide, we must first understand the key players and their evolving roles in this narrative. John Ramsey's public persona became a central issue. His calm demeanor during media appearances struck many, including key investigators, as cold and detached for a grieving father. However, context often omitted from news reports was that John Ramsey had endured previous family tragedy. His eldest daughter from his first marriage, Elizabeth, had died in a car crash several years earlier. Supporters argued his stoicism was a learned response to profound grief, not evidence of guilt. His focus on business logistics on December 26th was interpreted by Detective Steve Thomas as calculation, but by others as a man trying to impose order on chaos in the only way he knew how. The Ramseys' decision to hire high-powered defense attorneys and a public relations team almost immediately also raised suspicion, though their defenders argued it was a necessary response to being targeted by both police and media. Patsy Ramsey became an even more polarizing figure. Her background as a pageant mother was relentlessly exploited by the media. Tabloids painted her as a volatile stage mother, obsessed with perfection, projecting theories that JonBenét's murder was the result of a sudden, violent reaction to a childhood misbehavior, such as bedwetting, an issue JonBenét reportedly struggled with. Patsy's behavior during interviews, sometimes theatrical in her grief, sometimes combative, was picked apart by behavioral analysts. Was this the genuine anguish of a mother who had lost everything, or the elaborate performance of a woman desperate to conceal a terrible secret? Then there was Burke Ramsey, the 9-year-old brother who was supposedly asleep in his room throughout the entire ordeal. Police interviewed Burke early on. Child psychologists noted his relatively flat affect when discussing his sister's death, though they cautioned that children process trauma in highly individual ways, and his behavior was not definitively indicative of guilt. For years, Burke remained a background figure, until theories began to surface suggesting his involvement. The theory posits that a late-night conflict, perhaps over the pineapple, led to Burke striking his sister with a heavy object, like the flashlight found on the counter. In this scenario, the parents, upon finding their daughter dead, staged the elaborate kidnapping scene to protect their surviving child. This theory gained traction precisely because it offered an explanation for the internal nature of some evidence: the note, the weapon's origin, and the apparent lack of motive for the parents. In 2016, Burke gave his first major public interview to Dr. Phil, vehemently denying these claims. His nervous demeanor and tendency to smile while discussing disturbing events were widely commented upon, though again, experts cautioned against diagnosing behavior under such extraordinary pressure. This internal suspicion of the family drove the Boulder Police Department's investigation. Detective Steve Thomas became the public face of this perspective. For Thomas, the evidence was overwhelming. A staged scene where nothing valuable was taken, no credible evidence of forced entry, and a ransom note clearly written by an insider. He believed Patsy Ramsey killed JonBenét in a fit of rage, and John helped cover it up. Thomas eventually resigned in protest over District Attorney Alex Hunter's reluctance to prosecute, later writing a book detailing his case against the family. The opposing faction was led by Lou Smith, a highly respected, semi-retired homicide detective brought in by the DA's office to assist. Hunter hoped Smith would bring an objective eye to the investigation. Smith initially reviewed the case files, expecting to confirm the BPD's conclusion of family guilt. However, Smith experienced a profound change of heart. He began meticulously collecting evidence that pointed away from the family and toward an unknown intruder. Smith's methodology was to hunt for the intruder rather than try to prove the family did it. He focused on a set of clues the BPD had allegedly downplayed. This created an irreconcilable schism: the police force building a case against the Ramseys, while the DA's star investigator built a case against a phantom killer. To truly grasp the impossibility of this case, we must dissect the core pieces of evidence one by one, for each piece is a paradox. First, let's conduct a deep analysis of the ransom note. At nearly 3 pages long, written on paper from a pad found in the Ramsey home study, it is unlike almost any other ransom note in FBI history. Genuine ransom notes are short, functional, and to the point, designed to facilitate a quick exchange. This note was rambling and theatrical. Let's look at the language. Listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We do not like your country. We respect your business but not the country that it serves. This phrasing sounds stilted, like a poor imitation of a movie terrorist. In fact, investigators noted similarities to dialogue from films like Dirty Harry, If You Talk to Anyone, She Dies, and Ransom, Do Not Try to Grow a Brain. The author seems to be trying too hard to create a specific persona. The financial demand itself, $118,000, was highly specific. It was almost exactly the amount of a recent corporate bonus John Ramsey had received. This detail strongly suggested inside knowledge. An external kidnapper would likely demand a large, round number like $500,000 or $1 million. The note also contained personal, almost intimate admonitions. "I advise you to be rested so you can function tomorrow, and, John, you must have strong faith." The signature, Victory, SBTC, has never been deciphered and adds to the bizarre nature of the document. The physical evidence of the note's creation is perhaps most damning for the family theory. The notepad and the Sharpie pen used to write it were found inside the house. A practice draft, containing the partial phrase, "Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey," was discovered in the trash. Handwriting analysis, conducted by multiple experts for both the police and the defense, consistently pointed toward Patsy Ramsey, while analysts stopped short of declaring a 100% certain match, citing the possibility of deliberate disguise and the variability in Patsy's provided samples. The consensus was that she could not be eliminated, and that significant similarities existed between her handwriting and the note. For the Boulder police, this was the smoking gun. Now, let's dissect the physical evidence from the autopsy, starting with the garrote. The weapon was homemade, constructed from a length of nylon cord and the handle of a paintbrush. The paintbrush itself provided another strong link inward. The broken half of the brush handle was found inside Patsy Ramsey's art supply tote in the basement. The paint and materials on the brush matched other supplies in her kit. This required intimate knowledge of the contents of the basement and access to them. The counterargument focuses on the knot. Lou Smith and other experts argued that the complex knot used to fashion the garrote suggested a level of skill or practice inconsistent with a panicked mother staging a crime. Other knot experts, however, have challenged this, claiming the knot was relatively simple and could be replicated by anyone after a few tries. Psychologically, the use of a garrote is intimate and slow, contrasting sharply with the impulsive violence suggested by the head wound. The head wound adds another layer of contradiction. The sheer force required to inflict the 8-Finch skull fracture suggests intense violence, possibly rage. This aligns with the theory of a sudden, uncontrolled attack by a family member. However, the lack of blood spatter around JonBenét's body or in the initial discovery location has puzzled experts. A blow of that magnitude would be expected to produce significant cast-off blood, yet very little was found. This could suggest the area was cleaned, or that the dynamics of the blow somehow prevented spatter. The search for the murder weapon was fruitless. A large, heavy flashlight found on the kitchen counter was considered a prime candidate, but forensic analysis found no fibers or tissue on it. The evidence of sexual assault is perhaps the most disturbing and contested element. The autopsy confirmed trauma to JonBenét's vaginal area, including abrasions. For intruder theorists like Smith, this was clear evidence of a sexual predator's motive. However, investigators supporting the family theory proposed a different explanation, that the injuries were inflicted post-mortem, possibly with the broken paintbrush handle, as part of the staging to mislead investigators into believing a sexual predator was responsible. Early reports mentioned semen, but this was later clarified. No semen was present, but there was inflammation and injury. Finally, we confront the most powerful piece of evidence for the defense: the DNA. In 1997, early testing on blood spots in JonBenét's underwear revealed a mixed profile, but contained markers from an unknown individual. As technology improved, this evidence became clearer. In 2003, forensic scientist Dr. Angela Williamson isolated a touch DNA profile from the waistband of JonBenét's long johns. This profile, belonging to a single unknown male, was entered into the National CODIS database as Unknown Male Profile 1. The same profile was later found in other trace samples from the scene. Critically, this DNA did not match John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, Burke Ramsey, or anyone in their immediate circle. For many, this was definitive proof of innocence. In 2008, District Attorney Mary Lacy formally exonerated the Ramsey family based on this finding. She declared that the DNA evidence proved an intruder was present and responsible. However, the interpretation of touch DNA is highly controversial. Touch DNA refers to skin cells left behind when someone touches an item. Critics argue that this DNA's presence doesn't prove when it got there. It could represent innocent transfer from manufacturing, handling in a store, or incidental contact at some point before the crime. Other leading forensic experts, including those consulted by the Boulder police, argued strongly that Lacy overstepped by using the DNA to declare complete exoneration, stating that the mountain of circumstantial evidence pointing inward could not be negated by a single ambiguous trace sample. Let's explore Lou Smith's intruder theory in more detail. Smith theorized that a local predator had stalked JonBenét. Possibly after seeing her perform in pageants, he pointed to the broken basement window as the point of entry. A suitcase was positioned directly beneath it, seemingly used as a step. Smith noted a scuff mark on the wall consistent with a shoe. He also believed a cobweb in the window well was disturbed, contradicting initial police reports. Smith proposed that the intruder used a stun gun to incapacitate JonBenét, pointing to two small, ambiguous marks on her back. While this stun gun theory has been largely debunked by other forensic pathologists, it formed a core part of Smith's narrative of a planned predatory attack. The DNA was his cornerstone, proving an unknown male's presence on the victim's body. Now let's detail the family involvement theory. The most prevalent version suggests an accidental killing followed by a panicked cover-up. The scenario often begins with the pineapple. JonBenét, supposedly put straight to bed, somehow ate pineapple. The theory suggests she came downstairs for a snack, leading to a confrontation with either Patsy or Burke. If Burke was involved, perhaps he lashed out in childish anger over the food or another slight, striking her with the flashlight, not intending to kill her. The parents, waking to find their daughter dead and their son responsible, then initiate a massive cover-up. Patsy, in a state of shock and denial, spends hours drafting the elaborate ransom note. The staging of the body in the basement, complete with ligatures and sexual overtones, is a desperate attempt to point police away from the family. This theory explains the internal knowledge in the note, the origin of the garrote materials, and the pineapple evidence. This evidentiary stalemate led to a prolonged legal battle that played out in the public sphere. In 1999, after hearing evidence for over a year, a grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death. The indictment alleged that they unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly, and feloniously did permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenét Ramsey. This wording suggests the grand jury believed the parents were responsible for creating the circumstances of the death, even if they didn't strike the fatal blow themselves. In a stunning move, District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment and file charges. He argued that he could not meet the high burden of proof, beyond a reasonable doubt, required to win a conviction at trial. The contradictory nature of the evidence meant a skilled defense attorney could easily create reasonable doubt. The indictment remained sealed for 14 years, leaving the Ramseys in a state of public limbo, indicted by a grand jury but cleared by their prosecutor. The case's legacy was cemented by the intense media frenzy that surrounded it. The Ramsey case arrived at the dawn of the 24-hour news cycle and the rise of internet sleuthing. The narrative quickly became simplified. The bizarre pageant mother versus the grieving family. Tabloid media paid sources for unsubstantiated stories, and television pundits tried the case nightly. This relentless coverage arguably destroyed any chance for an unbiased jury pool and put immense pressure on investigators, potentially influencing decisions like Lacey's exoneration. Years passed. Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer in 2006, maintaining her innocence to her grave. John Ramsey has continued to advocate for the intruder theory, funding private investigations and pushing for more advanced DNA testing. Burke Ramsey, after receiving a significant settlement from CBS, following a documentary that accused him of the crime, has largely retreated from public life. As of today, the case remains officially open and unsolved. In late 2023 and early 2024, the Boulder Police Department and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation announced a new collaboration with forensic experts to apply cutting-edge DNA sequencing and genealogical research to the evidence. This new technology offers the best hope for identifying unknown male profile 1, potentially solving the case once and for all by building a family tree for the source of the DNA. As of 2025, items from the case are being retested for DNA, and new clues continue to be explored, but no definitive resolution has been reached. So where does this leave us? We are left with the anatomy of an unsolved case defined by its own internal conflicts. The JonBenét Ramsey case became a perfect mirror for our own biases. If you believe in the fallibility of family structures and the darkness that can hide behind a perfect facade, you see the evidence of guilt in the note and the staging. If you fear the outside world and believe in the protective power of family, you see innocence in the DNA and victimization by a flawed system. The unique anatomy of this case is not found in a single piece of evidence, but in the perfect equilibrium of opposing forces. The investigation was doomed by the initial contamination of the crime scene, and error that allowed ambiguity to flourish where clarity should have reigned. The evidence itself is a paradox. The note feels internal, the DNA feels external. The result is a case where two narratives exist simultaneously, both plausible, neither provable beyond a reasonable doubt. The legacy of JonBenét Ramsey is twofold. There is the tragic loss of a 6-year-old child, a life extinguished before it truly began, her identity forever buried beneath layers of speculation and sensationalism. And there is the enduring mystery, a case study in investigative failure and forensic ambiguity that serves as a permanent cautionary tale for law enforcement and media alike. The search for justice continues, but the search for absolute certainty may have ended on the morning of December 26, 1996, when friends and family walked through an unsecured crime scene, unknowingly trampling the very clues that might have led to the truth. This has been Anatomy of Crime. where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.
And I